Hey y'all, this is Rush. I finished the MageSeeker last night, wanted to give my thoughts on it, so let's talk about it. Now, to give a little preface on the game, MageSeeker is the latest game from publisher Riot Forge and developer Digital Sun Games, in which you play as Silas after his escape from execution and when he starts the Mage Uprising in Demacia. Now, MageSeeker is an RPG that plays similarly to a beat-em-up, where the gameplay loop is essentially progressing through a mission or level, and where you fight Demacian military, the Mageseekers, or whatever wildlife in Demacia, and while beating them, you gather loot and recruit rogue mages to your rebellion, and then the second part of the loop is going back to your base and spending that loot on upgrades for Silas or new spells for Silas, and those mages being assigned out to some of the mage teams, which improve either your fire spells, your ice spells, your wind spells, so on and so forth. And now to get into what I thought about the game. Overall, I'd say it's fairly average. It does well in some parts and rather poor in others. Now to talk about the art, it's pretty standard pixel art. It doesn't really stand out, it's not really ugly. The character portraits are just fine. The character models of the enemies are pretty okay. The enemy design will at least tell you, you can tell at a glance what that enemy can probably do. Maybe give one or two that don't really communicate that, but overall, it's passable. Now, in regards to level design, the game is a little lacking. A lot of the levels that you'll play through feel very samey, with the same art assets, nothing unique in each of the buildings or the cities. Nothing really stands out as super unique or interesting to look at, save some of the major set pieces. Overall, it's a little bit of a drawback. I'd really like to see Demacia or that part of the Runeterran world more fleshed out, and the level design felt just a little lacking for me. Now, the music for this game it's pretty passable. Riot usually has great champion themes for League of Legends or great season music videos and stuff like that. I wasn't expecting that for the MageSeeker, and I thought maybe we'd get one or two really great soundtracks, but there's not really anything that I would listen to on my Spotify playlist or while I'm driving or anything like that. So, it's fine. It's not annoying. So I'd say it passes, at least. For reliability and stability of the game, I didn't run into any bugs or problems that caused me to lose progress or caused the game to crash. I maybe ran into one visual bug that I can remember that caused the enemies that were already on the screen to all play their death animations again after casting a spell. That's a weird bug. It's a little funny, but nothing that caused me to throw any negatives at the game. So pretty good. Good job there. Now for the bigger parts of the game, the story. The story of MageSeeker is pretty straightforward. There's no major twists or major plot points that are gonna, make you think of Arcane or Ruined King, which has great character development. The character development in MageSeeker is fairly cut and dry. You kind of know where all the characters are going to end up. The major disappointment in story delivery for me was that there's no voice acting in this game. So everything has to be read, which, I'm fine with reading it, but I kind of wish that there was a little bit of voice acting at some points of the game, or at least in major portions would have been nice. All of it being silent with the save of 3 cutscenes was a little bit of a disappointment for me. And so for the gameplay of the MageSeeker, you play as Silas, which in League of Legends, his key ability is to steal the ultimates of the other champions that you'll fight against during a match of League. In this game, it translates to he can steal magic from any mage that he'll fight against, with each steal putting that specific enemy on a cooldown. So you can steal a spell from a fire mage, cast it at another soldier or something, and then steal another spell from an ice mage and cast that back at the fire mage, allowing you to steal and weave a lot of spells together with your light attacks, your heavy attacks, and you'll also pick up some ultimate abilities that are pretty fun to use with this Unchained mode, is kind of rage mode. Overall, the gameplay is pretty good. I enjoyed it. It gets a little samey towards the end game, maybe, where you're fighting the same tier of enemies. I think the game probably could have used another tier of enemies. It feels like there's only 3 tiers, but overall, it's fun. I'd say it's just fun. Now, the magic system of the game, which I kind of expected to be more robust, was a little bit underbaked, if I can say so, without it being too mean to it. It passes. It's fun to use the magic in this game. The only problem is some of the spells are completely useless or not as engaging to use as some of the others. powers. The beginning fire and ice spells or nature spell or projectiles, which make them very useful in a lot of cases. They only cost 1 mana. Or some of the other spells require you to be right on the enemy or cast in lines and stuff like that, which don't feel as good and cost more mana, so you'll often be using the lower abilities. So there's not a lot of different spells that you're going to be equipping all the time. Overall, stealing magic and casting it back at enemies and whatnot can be fun at times. So on the flip of that, sometimes it's frustrating because you'll have a ice enemy that you're up against, you'll steal the ice spell, and you won't have a fire spell to cast back at them, so you're doing ice damage to an ice enemy, they take less damage from that, and it turns into a slog of just doing light or heavy attacks which do very little, trying to steal their spells, which does very, very little to them as well, and so sometimes it just turns to a whittle down fight, which not very entertaining, but those particular moments are a little fewer than others, but it can happen in this game, which doesn't feel great. The basic enemies are pretty simple to deal with. The AI for the enemy isn't incredibly smart. A lot of the times I could deal with a specific healing type, while the other enemies are just standing on the other side of the screen, not doing anything, not threatening me, causing me to, they're not pushing me to dash around or do different strategies. It's the AI is just kind of idling a little bit too much for my taste. Now, the boss battles were pretty fun in this game. Best ones, or the most exciting one that I played, was against Garen. That was a lot of fun. I can't think of any boss battle that was a particular letdown except for one of the optional ones. This optional one is a little bit of a spoiler. You fight against Nocturne, but you don't know that it's Nocturne, and so the game reskins an earlier boss fight with a palette swap of the champion that you're fighting against. And once you defeat it, it reveals to be Nocturne. Huge letdown. I would rather they had implemented Nocturne's abilities or to woven that into his, nightmare that he was causing Silas to have during that boss battle. That's honestly the only major misstep in terms of boss battles. The other ones are they're pretty fun, so I like that at least. With all that said and everything I've said before about the art, the level, the music, the story, the gameplay, the different magic and melee systems, I'd say the game's about a 5. It's very average. For the price tag of $30, I would probably only really recommend this to somebody who's like me. You're into the League of Legends lore, the world, you have some establishment with the characters. If you don't, you'll probably find a lot of the dialogue is rather cringy. You don't really attach to some of these characters. The story progression can feel a little insane at times. Some of the character development literally happens at the snap of a finger, which feels bad. It's just average. But anyway, I'm Rush, and if you enjoyed the review, please consider giving me a like or a subscribe. The next thing I'm probably going to talk about is going to be Sifu, so you can check that out on my Twitch, which is linked down below. Thank you.